paramedical health profession in Cameroon, which is something which is handled by both two ministries, the Ministry of Higher Education and the Ministry of Public Health. And there's a gap because the two ministries need to harmonize in order to give a clear cut on what is supposed to be done in order to make the health professionals know where they are going and what they are doing. Here I'm trying to talk about the nursing, the midwifery, the pharmacy, the lab technicians, the dentistry, and the health management departments, which we need to create councils that handle all these departments in such a way that these councils will be able to be autonomous in order to innovate programs and monitoring in order to come out with what is needed in order to plan well to bring out health systems in Cameroon. Last year, there was an issue between the Ministry of Higher Education and Ministry of Public Health, but unfortunately, it had to disturb the intake of training. But this year, it has been solved, and the children now can be registered.
What provoked that problem in the training of health personnel in Cameroon between the two ministries?
You know, the Ministry of Higher Education is on education and training, and the Ministry of Public Health is supposed to consume what the Ministry of Higher Education is training. But there was a tussle here between the Ministry of Public Health Training and the Ministry of Higher Education Training, and all of them are supposed to consume something from the training. So there was that tussle, which it is the Prime Minister that had to solve it, so that they stop all the private training institutes not to train health personnel, stopped by the Minister of Public Health. But at the end, the Prime Minister intervened, and it was resolved that they should continue training health personnel. But they need to harmonize it. Harmonize it in the sense that before you train, you must have some basic necessities. Because if you look at it keenly now, so many, there are around 5,000 or 500 schools that are doing training in Cameroon now, but some of them are on laptops. So we need infrastructure. We need the personnel. We need the trainers in order to train well. So what I'm trying to put on here is that the government should harmonize this and handle it well in such a way that it is being monitored. Although now there's an association of the Ministry of Higher Education which is trying to work with the Ministry of Public Health in order to solve this issue.
So that decision by the Ministry of Public Health that suspended the training of health personnel by private higher institutions of learning like yours must have been very challenging, especially for an institution that, like yours, that focuses to a greater extent on the training of health personnel in different specialties.
True. You know, when the government is not giving any incentive and subventions to private higher institute. So what we rely on is only on the students that we campaign and develop and train them from what they give us. And there's a strong relationship that we create between the parents that are bringing these children, who sponsor the children, and us, who are the trainers. We have to look for good trainers from hospitals and create some partnership with hospitals in order to train them well. So when they had to stop us from having more students, it became very difficult for us to handle the infrastructure, to handle the trainers, to handle all the other equipments that are needed for the training. But however, it was solved. So I think from this year onward, we will have influx of students so that we can reestablish and have all the necessary materials to train, like the stimulation material. You have the computers. Since we are going digital, we have to even try to bring up digital programs that train healthcare personnel or healthcare professionals so that we can be able to collaborate with the partner with the hospitals, private and state or government, in order to bring out good training so that they can fit in the job market. Because the training that we give should fit what is happening in the job market. As a result, we work with some of the workers that are working in hospitals in order to apply what is happening in hospitals so that when they come out, they can either create their own healthcare facilities or they go back to those hospitals or healthcare facilities to work with them in order to integrate in the job market.
Right. You're going to tell us more about that, because that is a very important concern, bridging the gap between the job market or exigencies of the job market and the training that is offered in higher institutions of learning. But before that, I just want you to clear the air on this issue, because there may be some students who are maybe still thinking that suspension still holds, and they may still be found in a kind of confusing situation and so on. But you say that problem has been solved.
Thanks to the hard work that was done by the president of the private institute of training, that work in order to, with the Ministry of Higher Education and the Ministry of Public Health, alongside with the Prime Minister, in order to solve that issue. So this year, the issue has been solved. So parents should not be afraid to send their children to us to train, because take note that not all the higher institutes in Cameroon are legalized. So they should look for those that are legalized and send their children there. Alpha is one of the legalized schools. If you can go to the website, you will see it, and you see our authorization from the Ministry of Higher Education, and we are part of the member of the Association of Higher Education in Cameroon. And I want to say here that the Ministry of Public Health having a growing industry, we train our students in such a way that they can be used domestically and some move out of the country. And we are doing this following some standards that have been laid down by the ministry and by the WHO on how to train, so that if our students go out of the country, like those who have traveled to Canada, to France, to Europe, to America, they meet the standards that are needed by the health industry. So that is why we are calling on those that are training that there should be a lot of collaboration with the healthcare facilities. Like we have, I'll give some examples here. We have the partnership with hospitals like the gyneco-obstetric, that's the General Hospital, the Bonasama, Daido, and many other private hospitals like Polyclinic Bonanjo, that we train in order train with them, so that the students can do some internship in order to acquire skills and knowledge where they can be performant when they are on the field. One of the things that we are doing in order to encourage job creation is that Alpha has a campus. We have 4 campuses. Our main campus, which is found in Bepele, we have opened a hospital there where a doctor has been employed, nurses are working there, so that we make use of what we are training.
Okay. Now, earlier you mentioned something that seems to be very critical about institutions, training health personnel, institutions that are not legalized, that have not been authorized by the ministry or the ministries concerned, Ministry of Higher Education, the Ministry of Public Health. But when this happens, and you also mentioned the fact that some of them are training without the appropriate infrastructures put in place, this seems to be a very serious problem when we consider the fact that they are training health personnel, people who are going to be handling the health of citizens, health of Cameroonians. There could be deadly or disturbing consequences of this.
Yes, my brother, you know, what is happening in Cameroon is that there are no jobs. Some people with their money who are not health personnel, because some of us who are doing the training started training from a very grassroots, from some of us were trained by government and in the medical field, and we decided not to continue with in the hospitals. We decided to go into the training field in order to bring out those who will continue in the field. But some of the people who are in the field are business people. They pump in money. To be candid, if you go into in a place like Douala, where there are the highest number of higher education training privately, you realize that they have very big buildings, skyscrapers, but the knowledge that is there is very low. But those who are in the field, who are grounded with what is supposed to be taught, they have the ethics and deontology, are supposed to follow up the training. So we are I'm calling here that government should monitor very seriously the infrastructure and check those schools that, you know, without jobs, government to some of them, they are given the creation and functioning without monitoring that they have the necessary infrastructure to carry out the training. So they are just having nonchalant type of training where they can be very deadly. They can kill. You know, health, you cannot double health. You cannot when somebody is not well trained, he will do the wrong thing. And when the wrong thing is done, you cannot come back with that person again. So I'm calling on the state to, in fact, to monitor, and before they give authorization to schools to train, they should be able to see that they have the necessary material, infrastructure, stimulating material, and have partnerships with the healthcare facilities. We are existing for almost 18 years today. We have created our partnerships. So that is why our students, immediately they are finished, we prepare them, counsel them, and prepare them CVs and send them to the hospitals that they have been working. They receive them and they work there.
So, this weakness or these flaws in the training process, does that explain the significant rate of medical errors that we have in health facilities today in Cameroon?
That is very true, because, you know, with the unemployment situation in Cameroon, some schools admit students who are not science inclined to do the training, either in nursing or in laboratory or in pharmacy. And at the end of the day, imagine somebody who did history or literature is found himself doing nursing, pharmacy, or medical lab. It's very dangerous to the human health, because you need to have the prerequisites. You need to have a base in order to enter into the training. So what we do here is that we do a selection of students, mostly the science students. If you want to enter into the ordinary national diploma program, you must be a science student. Science inclined, you must have at least biology or chemistry. And then if you want to do the higher national diploma program, you must have science too. In order to do the bachelor's program or master program, you must be science inclined. But this is not respected by those who are, I call them, people are looking for money in the market through the medical field, which is very dangerous. I think the government should be very sensitive on that and follow it up so that it should not be destroying people's lives.
With the increasing rate of medical error-related deaths in hospitals across the country because of some of these issues. But then, now, tell us, how are you working to bridge that gap between the training that is offered in higher institutions of learning like yours and the exigencies of the job market? Tell us more about that. You started talking about it, notably with the perspective of job creation, training people who can create jobs, not only job seekers. training people who meet the exigencies of the job market, the exigencies of the domain, because the health domain is, I want to say, a domain where there is no space for error, because an error can lead to death, and the error may never be repaired. There may never be a possibility to repair the error. So what are you doing to ensure that those who are trained are or meet the exigencies of the specialty in which they are trained, the exigencies of the job market, and also be able to create jobs, not only job seekers?
That is a very good question. You know, training needs to initiate from a base. Even if you have been trained with a certificate like an ordinary national diploma program, you need to move on. So what I am doing, I go to some of those hospitals where there are workers there who need to come back. You know, in Europe, there's what you call, you work and you train to have either certification programs or diploma programs. In order to grow, you don't just end at a lower level like the ordinary national diploma. You move to a higher national diploma program and enter into a bachelor's program, which is a research program. Take note that in order to know more on anything, you must research. Research on health is very important. To know some of the things that are happening with life and handle them. So all those who are working on the field and those who are training, we encourage them to move on, to climb the ladder. The ladder is moving on from a lower level to another level to a higher level where they can be able to acquire knowledge through research and through collaboration with other healthcare facilities and like working, we have partnership with universities where we collaborate with them in order to improve the standard of training and teaching and learning so that it moves on and reduce the gap of malpractices. Because those are some of the things that happen. Because lack of knowledge means that you are empty. Some people some trainees who are having low level can kill somebody without knowing. But if they know that these are some of the things, you go for further education and acquire more knowledge, you'll be able to know what to do.
All right. So, about job creation, what are you doing to ensure that those that leave your institution, for example, do not only end up as job seekers, but engage in entrepreneurship, creating jobs that can help other Cameroonians and even facilitate access to healthcare?
Yes, you know, there's a policy in the Ministry of Public Health that a trained diploma nurse and a trained lab technician can open a healthcare facility. So what I encourage them after training is that I start by preparing them with good curriculum, what you call CVs, to either go and start looking for a job or to team up and create and open their own healthcare facilities, which must be legalized, passing through the normal ethical and government authorization. So by so doing, in town here, there's many of my students who are having their private healthcare facilities that they're working there. They've employed others. As I said before, Alpha is having a healthcare facility in Bepele. There's a doctor. There are 5 nurses working there. And most of the hospitals around town, I mean, Mbingo, Acha, some of the private hospitals, just to name a few, Polyclinic Bonanjo, Alpha students are working there. And these students have been tested by the staff or the owners of those hospitals and found out that we are doing good training. That is how we are creating. And we have, we work with some other foreign countries where, although we don't encourage our students to go out, but, you know, the market is more rich in foreign countries than here. So most of our students, some of them, they have been receiving recommendations from Canada and many other countries to confirm if these students were trained in my school. So they are working there. And some of them encourage some of their junior ones to come here because what we are doing here is of standard. So as far as job creation is concerned, to bridge that gap, we are doing our best to let our children be more enterprising in creating their own hospitals so that they can employ others. Pharmacies, hospitals, laboratories, so that they can make primary health care closer to the population. That's what we are starting to do in Cameroon.
On what they want to do, this is like an orientation for those who might still be in a kind of confused situation, because today it's very easy to find a student after advanced level. You're asking the student, what do you want to do next? And it's still like thinking to do this, I want to do this, nursing, clinical psychology, or the different specialties. They're kind of confused between what they want to do and what they want to become.
Orientation is one of the key things that is not done in secondary and high schools. So what we do after obtaining the advanced level is that we create an orientation, which somebody like me is one of the person who is doing orientation, pre-orientation before you enter into our school, so that we direct you what you can do. Students come with subjects that you need to send them to business management department. Some need to go to the public health or do some subjects in the public health, and then they are confused. So you need to call them down, look at the prerequisite, what they had before, and then you bring them up and tell them what is necessary and how this can take them to start a career. If this is not done, the children will spend 3 years and abandon the certificate and need to start from somewhere again. So I'm calling on parents to go to the schools that are legalized and ask those who can orientate their students well for their orientation to take place. And I'm calling on especially government to create the councils so that they have specialists that handles specialties. Like those, there should be specialists that handle pharmacology, medicine, laboratory sciences, midwifery, dentistry, and even nursing, so that these people should be monitored on how they are following up those who are growing in that field to take it like a career. They should not go and fumble. And I'm also calling on the government to regulate and monitor the health field so that it should be profitable to us, because without health, you cannot do anything. So we should look at health as one of the first priority. And the people who are coming, doing the training, should be specialists in that field. If you are a lab technician, you should move from an assistant lab technician and grow to a scientist, to a biologist, so that there should be many improvements in what we are doing as far as training is concerned in Cameroon. We should not continue to do the fast way of doing things and then putting people's lives at risk.
Before we go, maybe you had one last thing to say, something which I didn't ask you to say about this whole issue of training of health personnel in Cameroon today.
I will end up by thanking you first for coming, and that most health trainers should collaborate in order to improve the training. Those that have the experience should share their knowledge and wisdom with those that are coming young, in order to have good products at the end. Otherwise, we will be fighting a war where nobody will win the war, and the person that is suffering is the patients and those that we are providing help to them. health givers or health providers should be well trained, and they should collaborate and create partnership with renowned health facilities in order to handle their trainees well. So when they graduate, they should know where they are going and can be able to improve and bridge the gap of what is happening in Cameroon now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you too for coming. I hope that you will still come again for more discussion on this topic, because it's a very vast topic. You know, as I said before, the industry of health in Cameroon is growing. Although the international consumer of our trainees than Cameroon, it's good that we talk so that people should know that we should emphasize on how we can develop and valorize our training in Cameroon and create job markets. The government should do that, because the government is the monitoring body. They should be able to give subvention, give aid to the training schools so that they can be able to bring out good trainees through infrastructure and give them money to motivate and give incentives to the trainers, because without that, we'll be doing something that will not be nice to the human body.
Maybe you want to suggest something to government about the fact that many of the health personnel that are trained in Cameroon by higher institutions of learning like yours often find themselves abroad, in Canada, in other nations, working there. And when we look at it very well, we discover that it's a problem of working conditions, it's a problem of poor pay and things like that. What can government do in that dimension?
You know, we have urban settlements, we have rural settlements. I'm suggesting that the government should motivate those who are in urban centers, in rural centers, more than those that are in urban centers, because there are poor infrastructures in the rural areas. So most of the workers influx into the urban centers and look for jobs there. The rural areas are abandoned. So government should give incentives more to those that are working in rural areas than those that are found in urban areas. Secondly, the government should be able to ameliorate the infrastructure of the health sectors, the hospitals. If you go to some rural areas, and even in urban areas, you see some of the health facilities, they are disgraceful. You know, the government is looking at it as if human life is something that we need to cherish. God has created his people. And another thing that we should do, which is very important, end by saying that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. People should fear God when they are treating people. Because when you kill somebody, if human don't sanction you, God will sanction you. So we should be able to know how to handle health situations and know that we are working not only for human, we are working also for God. Because God has given us a talent. We should be able to use this talent in a way that it helps the people to have more life. If somebody is dying, help him to die and help them to live. Not that money. The problem here is that we should try to harmonize it. Government should come in and help those who are in the hospitals with infrastructure. Most of the platforms for treatments are poor in Cameroon. So the government should try to do something in order to help us come out from this situation. Thank you very much.
And increase the salaries of health workers also, especially those in the private sector.
Yes, in general, you know, the salary issue is a major issue in Cameroon. The salaries should be looked upon. You know, there are some health workers have been striking and nobody listens to you. The syndicate goes there, they keep procrastinating. They should know that health is wealth. And without health, there are so many things that will be wrong with Cameroon. So we should increase their salary and give incentives for those who are hardworking. There are some people that are more hardworking than others. Those who are hardworking should be encouraged to continue to work hard.
the President of the 88th session of the UN General Assembly, Madam Annalena Baerbock, Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I congratulate you, Madam President, on your election to preside over the 80th session of the UN General Assembly. Madam President, you can count on Kenya's full support throughout your tenure as you steer the Assembly into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, 8 years ago, in the aftermath of the unprecedented global destruction and devastating war, the international community came together in hope. They created this organization, the United Nations, as a shield against the horrors of war, as a platform for dialogue, and as a bridge to a better, fairer, more secure global community. What is often forgotten or not mentioned today is that the United Nations grew out of the failure of the League of Nations that existed between 1919 and 1945. The League of Nations did not collapse for lack of good intentions or noble objectives. Formed at the end of the First World War and as part of the Treaty of Versailles, it was humanity's first attempt to build a permanent international organization to stop aggression and war and bring nations together. Its ambitions were to achieve collective global security, disarmament, peaceful dispute resolution, and cooperation on humanitarian and social issues. Despite these ideals, the League of Nations failed. The United States never joined, other great powers came and went, and without enforcement authority, its condemnation carried little weight. When Japan invaded Manchuria, when Italy marched into Ethiopia, and when Hitler openly defied its rules, the League stood by, helpless and powerless. By the late 1930s, its credibility had collapsed, and with the outbreak of the World War II, it was rendered irrelevant. Madam President, this history is both a lesson and a warning. Institutions rarely fail because they lack vision or ideals. More often, they drift into irrelevance when they do not adapt, when they hesitate to act, and when they lose legitimacy. To remain relevant, institutions must be reimagined, must be reformed, renewed, and aligned with emerging realities. 8 decades ago, the founders of the UN sought to correct the failures of the League of Nations by creating a stronger, more inclusive organization anchored in the principles of, and I quote, "We the people of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war," end of quote. Today, we are gathered for the UN at 80. The question is unavoidable. Is the United Nations relevant to the demands of our time? Can it continue to serve humanity in the face of current realities? Or has it become a relic of a bygone era? Madam President, Excellencies, we meet against a grim global backdrop. Conflict rages in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, the Sahel, the Horn of Africa, and beyond. Climate disasters grow fiercer by the day. Inequality deepens, pandemics loom, and technological disruptions outpaces governance. Instead of trust, mistrust is spreading. Instead of solidarity, fragmentation is taking root. In place of hope, anxiety fills our global community. We are living, to borrow from the words of the founders of this institution, not in larger freedom, but in growing uncertainty. At this moment of turbulence, when we most need a strong United Nations, the organization faces its deepest crisis in credibility and capacity. Funding cuts have paralyzed its operations. Bureaucracy has slowed its response. The Security Council remains frozen in the post-war structures of 1945, unable to act inclusively, with fairness, and with speed. Ladies and gentlemen, I can, however, state with absolute conviction that the United Nations has been one of humanity's greatest achievements. For 8 decades, it has held back the specter of global war, calmed conflicts from Cambodia to Liberia, and stood guard in some of the world's most dangerous places through the courage of its peacemakers and peacekeepers. Few institutions in humanity's history can claim such a legacy. The United Nations has stood at the front lines of humanitarian crisis, from famine relief in the Horn of Africa to emergency shelter for millions of Syrian and Ukrainian refugees. It was at the forefront in the eradication of smallpox, coordinated global responses to HIV and AIDS, Ebola, and COVID-19, and continues to champion universal vaccination. Its agencies have advanced women's rights, protected children, safeguarded refugees, and set global norms on everything from disarmament to climate action. The UN Sustainable Development Goals remain a shared blueprint for human progress. These are achievements no nation could have achieved alone, however rich, however great, or however powerful. And yet, every institution, no matter how noble its origins or impactful its legacy, must adapt to changing times or slide into irrelevance. Today, the United Nations stands at a crossroads of renewal on one hand or decay on another. Put differently, after 80 years, the rhymes of time are calling on us to reimagine the original promise that inspired the founding of the United Nations, and that is the quest for global peace, development, and human rights. But this call must now be answered in a global context that is profoundly different from the post-war era in which the UN was conceived then. We would be denying the cold, hard truth if we say that the United Nations is delivering as it should. On peace and security, its voice is too often drowned by the rivalries of great powers, while some nations simply ignore its resolutions and do as they please. Too often, the UN's blue helmet, once a symbol of moral authority, no longer commands the same respect. From the conflicts in Gaza to Ukraine, to the crisis in Sudan, DRC Congo, Somalia, and the Sahel, we see actors proceed undeterred by the United Nations calls. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Kenya speaks from the experience of a nation deeply invested in multilateralism. For decades, we have placed our troops and police in harm's way for peacekeeping missions across Africa and beyond, from Somalia to Democratic Republic of Congo, from South Sudan to most recently in our neighborhood here in Haiti. Over the past 15 months, we are proud to have led the multinational security support mission in Haiti, not because it has been easy, but because solidarity is the essence of the United Nations. Madam President, the mandate of the MSS mission is coming to an end in a few days. As the lead nation, allow me to briefly share our experiences, the successes and the challenges, as both a cautionary tale and a living lesson about the strengths and weaknesses of the current global security governance architecture. For far too long, the people of Haiti called out to the world. Too often, their pleas were met with silence, hesitation, or half measures. Haiti became a tragic reminder of what happens when the international community looks away, prevaricates, or offers half-hearted support. When Kenya responded to the quest for the Haitian authorities, it was in the belief that we were joining a genuinely multinational effort. We welcomed and fully embraced Resolution 2699, by which the United Nations Security Council authorized the MSS with Kenya as the lead nation. Drawing on our decades of peace support operations, we stepped forward, stepped up, and deployed our officers to confront the rampant menace of gang violence in Port-au-Prince and its environs. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, the mission has operated in a volatile environment under enormous constraints. It has been underfunded, under-equipped, and operated below 40% of its authorized personnel strength. Our police officers have valiantly shouldered responsibilities without the full logistical support that would accompany any mission sanctioned by the United Nations. Despite these challenges, and against all odds, the MSS has delivered results many thought were impossible. The presidential palace, once under siege from gangs, is today restored as the seat of government. The police headquarters and the police training center, once overrun by gangs, are now secure, with the academy resuming the training of new police officers, over 700 of whom graduated a few months ago. Schools that had been shattered by violence have reopened, with children back in class, learning and progressing. Roads once manned or blocked by gangs have now free-flowing traffic. Cases of kidnapping and extortion have reduced sharply. The airport and the seaport, once surrounded by gangs, are now abuzz with normal operations. Which begs the question, if so much could be achieved with limited resources and stretched personnel within just 15 months, what more could have been accomplished if the United Nations fraternity had truly acted together in solidarity with the people of Haiti? From this podium, I wish to assure all partners and actors that with the right personnel, adequate resources, appropriate equipment, and necessary logistics, Haiti's security can be restored. Gangs can be neutralized and the safety of streets, schools, hospitals, and homes secured. The continued harassment, abductions, and criminal acts undermining the lives of Haitians are unacceptable, unjustifiable, and must be stopped by this organization, the United Nations. Madam President, as the UN Security Council deliberates on the next steps, we must not lose sight of the fact that the situation in Haiti demands sustained, coordinated, and undivided international attention. A careful and orderly transition from MSS is essential to consolidate the hard-won gains so far achieved. I urge the Security Council and all partners to remain steadfast in ensuring that Haiti moves forward on a path of peace, stability, and renewal. Ladies and gentlemen, on human rights, our principle is clear and unwavering. The protection of civilians and respect for humanitarian law cannot be applied selectively. We cannot condemn suffering in one place and turn a blind eye in another. Kenya is gravely concerned by the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and by the immense suffering of civilians caught in the devastation of disproportionate military operations. At the same time, we call for the unconditional release of Israeli hostages. In line with the African Union and United Nations resolutions, we also call for a permanent ceasefire, for strict adherence to international humanitarian law, and for the launch of a credible political process. Only through such a process can the vision of a two-state solution be realized, where Israel and Palestine live side by side in peace, security, and stability. Kenya is equally deeply troubled by the worsening humanitarian situation in Sudan, where innocent citizens are caught in the crossfire of a needless war. We fully endorse the Quad, comprising Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States, in affirming that there cannot be a military solution and that only political dialogue offers a viable path forward. We join the Quad in urging all parties, including SAF, RSF, and the external actors, to respect Sudan's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity, and firmly reject any attempts to divide the country, reaffirming our unwavering support for a unified Sudan for the benefit of all its people. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, those who look to the future with a clear vision know that climate change is not only the single greatest threat of our age, but also one of the greatest transformation opportunities of our time. The global stocktake has made it plain that the world is off track. Current national determined contributions are steering us towards temperature rises far beyond any safe threshold. This is the difference between survival on one hand and devastation for millions across the world on the other. Kenya and Africa are not passive victims of this crisis. We are taking bold steps showing that climate action is not only possible, but can also be the foundation for inclusive growth. We are building a climate-resilient society by embedding adaptation into every sector, from agriculture and energy to infrastructure and livelihoods, to sustainable mining and artificial intelligence. This ambition is visible on the ground. Today, 93% of Kenya's electricity comes from renewable sources: geothermal, wind, solar, and hydro. We are expanding investments in e-mobility, climate-smart agriculture, clean cooking solutions, and green manufacturing. We are also pioneering nature-compatible solutions such as sustainable waste management and circular economy interventions. Africa, too, is uniting its voice. In 2023, in Nairobi, we hosted the inaugural Africa Climate Summit, where the continent adopted the Nairobi Declaration on Climate Action and Call to Action. Just 2 weeks ago, in Addis Ababa, Africa came together once more at the second Africa Climate Summit to reaffirm our commitment and strengthen our ambition for climate-positive growth. We declared Africa not just as a victim of the crisis, but as a source of solutions, with climate action driving economic growth, transformation, and job creation for our communities. Ambition, ladies and gentlemen, cannot stand on willpower alone. Implementing our new NDCs will require $56 billion. That is why we call on the global community to unlock the $300 billion agreed at Baku, and to accelerate negotiations towards the new $1.3 trillion goal under the Baku-Belém roadmap. Without affordable finance and without reform of the international financial architecture, the promise of climate action in Africa will remain constrained. Madam President, in the aftermath of World War II, the Bretton Woods institutions were created to stabilize the global economy and rebuild war-torn Europe. At that time, their design reflected the power and interests of the victorious nations, who were also their primary shareholders and beneficiaries. The IMF was tasked with upholding the gold standard exchange rate system, while the World Bank was established to finance Europe's reconstruction. Both have since evolved into development finance institutions, but their structures, decision-making, and governance remains dominated by wealthy nations. Today, the global context is vastly different. The global standard collapsed 5 decades ago, and Europe has long since been rebuilt. Yet, the governance of these institutions has not kept pace with needs of a multipolar world, especially the needs of poor and developing nations. The mismatch between shareholders and stakeholders has become starkly visible. For instance, during the IMF's recent allocation of special drawing rights, 64% went to wealthy nations. Just imagine, 64%. With little need for liquidity support. They didn't need the money anyway, but they got 64%. While the poorer countries received just 2.4%. What a disconnect. The imbalance highlights how the very institutions meant to safeguard global finance stability often perpetuate inequality and instability. I have argued, and I say it again, that the current global financial architecture punishes poor countries with high interest rates and enormous conditionalities while rewarding rich nations with lower interest rates and softer lending rates. Its rules, priorities, and allocation mechanisms consistently favor those already prosperous, while trapping vulnerable economies in cycles of debt, high borrowing costs, and inadequate access to emergency support and concessional funding. It is imperative to transform these institutions into genuinely independent, apolitical global bodies that their operations are aligned with their global mandate. Such a shift would democratize decision-making, restore credibility, and allow the IMF and the World Bank to serve all countries fairly rather than reinforcing old hierarchies. But Africa is not merely waiting for external prescriptions. We are taking bold and deliberate steps to strengthen our financial independence, safeguard our stability, and accelerate our development. Kenya, for instance, fully endorses the establishment of the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, launched with the Africa Union in February 2024. This alliance brings together our homegrown banks, Afrexim Bank, the Africa Finance Corporation, the Trade and Development Bank, Shelter Africa Re, Africa Development Bank, Africa Trade and Investment Development Insurance, and ZEPRI, institutions that embody Africa's determination to mobilize resources, finance trade, and build resilience on our own terms. At the same time, the Africa Union is championing 3 transformative institutions: the Africa Central Bank, which will issue a single currency and free our trade from dependence on foreign money; the Africa Monetary Fund, positioned to stabilize our economies and give us true financial sovereignty; and the Africa Investment Bank, designed to mobilize resources for infrastructure, industrialization, and integration that Africa needs to rise. And to complete this vision, the Africa Credit Rating Agency, one that understands our realities, values our uniqueness, and tells our story with fairness and truth, has already been established. Excellencies, as we mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, Africa also marks 20 years since the Ezulwini Consensus and the City Declaration, the 2 historic milestones that establishes the common African position on UN Security Council reforms. For 2 decades, Africa has spoken in one voice, demanding justice, equity, and representation in the highest organ of global governance. This demand, however, continues to be ignored deferred, or endlessly debated to the detriment of both Africa and the legitimacy of the United Nations itself. You cannot claim to be the United Nations while disregarding the voice of 54 nations. It is not possible. Africa is no longer willing to wait on the margins of global governance while decisions about peace, security, and development are made without our understanding, without our perspectives, and without our voice. Africa's exclusion is not only unacceptable, unfair, and grossly unjust, it also undermines the very credibility of the United Nations, this organization. Africa dominates most of the Security Council agenda, provides some of the largest contingents of UN peacekeeping forces, and bears the heaviest costs of instability. Yet we remain the only continent without a permanent seat at the main table where decisions about our destiny are made. Africa deserves, ladies and gentlemen, at the very least, 2 permanent seats with full rights, including the right to veto, and 2 additional non-permanent seats on the United Nations Security Council. The world must understand that reforming the Security Council is not a favor to Africa or to anybody. It is a necessity for the United Nations' own survival. If the United Nations is to remain relevant in this century, it must reflect today's realities, not the post-war power arrangements of 1945. Madam President, despite the stated and evident weaknesses of the United Nations, it still remains humanity's best chance at global solidarity. No other institution has the universal legitimacy or convening power of the UN. From coordinating humanitarian relief in times of war and disaster, to mobilizing the global response to COVID-19, to driving consensus on climate change through the Paris Agreement, the UN has consistently shown that the world can achieve together what no nation can accomplish on its own, however mighty or great or powerful. As Doug Hammarskjöld, the UN's Second Secretary General, once observed, and I quote, "The United Nations was not created to take humanity to heaven, but to save it from hell." End of quote. That mission is as urgent today as it was 8 decades ago. At a time when conflicts are multiplying, when climate change threatens every economy, and when inequality is widening, the need for a functioning, credible, effective, and a multilateral system has never been greater. It is through the UN that nations have pooled resources to vaccinate billions of children, to protect refugees from through the work of the UNHCR, and to keep the peace in more than 70 missions across the world. Without the UN, these achievements, modest though they may sometimes seem, would not have been possible. That is why we must resist the temptation to give up on the UN or abandon it. We must make it fit for purpose, reform its structures, strengthen its mandate, and ensure its decisions reflect today's realities rather than the geopolitical map of a bygone era. As one of the hosts of the UN headquarters and the only one in the Global South, Kenya stands ready to do its part to enable the organization to go through this phase of renewal successfully as envisaged by the Secretary General under UN 80 reforms. In conclusion, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, the 80th anniversary of the United Nations must be more than a commemoration. It must be a turning point for the organization. Let us seize this moment to reimagine and rebuild the UN into a body that commands legitimacy, responds with speed, and delivers justice for all. I thank you, and God bless you.
This is all about the Noni people. The Noni is found in Bui division of the Northwest region. When you go to school, is to actually line up with your people, line up with the citizens, line up with the people with whom you live. And when I grew up, I didn't actually read much about the history of my people, the Noni people. And one of the commitments I took in my life was to make my people known. And therefore, I went and dug into the history of my people, the Noni people, which, of course, is little known about many people. You call Noni somewhere, and people are doubting, where is it found? And one of the things that we think that to project the people is also to put in books that people read and remember them and know them exactly who they are. So I went further to dig down on the history of my people, and I've been able to get some authentic history of my people, migration, and up to where they settled today. They are of the Chikar people, and many people didn't know. So they migrated and settled the way they are. Even about their position in the big Bui division, it is very, very important. You know that the Noni people, Noni is like the breadbasket of Bui division, because it is found in a area with all the fertile land. And when you talk about provision of food in Bui division, we are talking about food that comes from Noni. And therefore, these are a people with a rich culture. These are the people who are very, very determined in life, and they are people a force to reckon with in life. And therefore, people like this are people who are industrious and who are supposed to be regarded in Cameroon. And therefore, to project them in terms of culture, in terms of agriculture, because there are a lot of things, a lot of food stuff and all of things that happen there. We have to project that. And the kinds of food that we produce, the economy that they grew, and all of those. And the people, their culture, their tradition has been projected in this book titled Noni, the untold history of an undeceptible people. Of course, trying to celebrate who the people are through writing of the history of the people. And I must say that they are a proud people. And I put it here for each and every person to read and know about Noni better. The idea of this book, Noni, the history of an indeceptible people, actually came from the need to define, to identify, to search for the origin of a people, the need to be able to project a people, their culture, their civilization, their migration, their settlement, their economy. It gave me that urge to be able to project them. And you know, they say in Latin that scripsit mani means written words remain. And I thought that's one of the ways to immortalize my people as I grew up to know them, because there was very little literature about my people from what I grew up knowing. And being an intellectual, one of the things I can give to my people is to define them, to immortalize them. So I saw the need to dig deep into the history of my people, because in history, people's culture is very important. If you don't know where you are coming from, you'll never know where you are going to. So one of the things was for me to define where they are coming from, so that exactly they should be able to define where they are going to. So that was that need that pushed me. And you know, these are people of great potentials. And as I said, there are people, Noni is a very, very fertile ground in terms of economy. And Noni is a breadbasket of the division called Bui. And therefore, these are people that we are not just supposed to forget. There are people who have to come to the limelight, let them know that these people, they exist, and that the culture exists. And also, you know, when we grew up, we knew about that marginalization in terms of culture, whereby there are some funds who were actually subverting the funds of Noni. And that book, I have earmarked that a fund is a fund. Noni has 10 funds, and we all respect the 10 fundoms as they are. There is none that is bigger than the other. So these are some particularities about Noni that I want the world to know, whereby you find some other villages, they have paramount funds and all that. Noni doesn't have a paramount fund. We have 10 villages with 10 funds. And these are things to celebrate, because this is actually an issue that is an advantage to us rather than a disadvantage if we canalize it well. And this is the story I want to tell in Noni, the history of anti-discipleship people. There are a whole lot of associations that have been formed in the world about identity. I will quote you some. You talk about Pan-Africanism was sown out of the quest for the reassertion of the identity. Negritude was formed out of the quest for reassertion of identity. Afrocentrism was formed in the quest to reassert the identity. Even feminism was formed with the need of reasserting. This just to let you know that the identity, what you call identity, Black consciousness as a whole was a quest for identity. So the issue of identity is not an issue to be trampled on. It is an issue to take with care. And that's why even in Cameroon, we talk about unity in diversity. When we say that diversity now comes to the identity that the people protect. And once you tamper with that diversity, you tamper with the unity of a country. And therefore, a man who doesn't have his identity doesn't have a culture. Because this identity comes from the culture. And you are nurtured with, matured with.